Hey everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video review, and today we're going to be doing The Shade, issues number 1 through 4. Take a look at these comic covers right here. Now, when it comes down to The Shade, I wasn't actually going to pick up this miniseries, which is going to be a 12-issue miniseries. Would that be a maxi series? I'm not sure. Anyways, I wasn't originally going to pick this up. Mainly because I don't know too much about The Shade, and I know he has a heavy backstory, especially with James Robinson in the Starman material. However, there is a few reasons why I decided to pick this up. And the biggest reason is James Robinson himself. Let's actually talk about our good friend James Robinson. Now, when it comes down to James Robinson's work in comics, I've read a good amount of his stuff, but not the big things that a lot of people give him praise for. For example, I read his Justice League stuff, and I've also read his stuff that he did with Batman, but I've never read his Starman stuff. I do plan on reading it at some point, but I just don't have the money right now. I mean, those omnibuses are not cheap, and there's like 6 or 7 of them. That's a lot. And I just don't have the money to kind of put out for that. However, I do want to get it eventually. But for the most part, what I find from James Robinson is that he's a very good writer that understands the characters that he's writing, and that he puts a lot of detail in the plot and in the dialogue for these characters. Now, that's not the big reason why I wanted to pick up the Shade series. Even though I knew how good James Robinson was at writing in comic books, it was actually James Robinson himself that made me want to pick up The Shade. See, I listen to podcasts from time to time, as everyone does, and one of the podcasts I try to listen to weekly is the Comic Vine one, which is actually pretty enjoyable when they have it up. Sometimes they skip it a week or two, and it's actually quite annoying. It's not consistent, but when they have it up, it's an enjoyable podcast. They have James Robinson jump on from time to time also. And every time he's on the podcast, he comes off as nothing but a nice guy. A fun guy to listen to. He's interesting, he's nice, he's down to earth. I enjoy it. And he kind of seduced me into picking up Starman. Kind of like how Scott Snyder seduced me into picking up Swamp Thing. Not Starman, The Shade. Wow. Anyways, the thing is it's not like he talked about The Shade in detail and I was like, whoa, I should pick this up. Kind of like what I did with Scott Snyder and Swamp Thing. No, it was more or less James Robinson himself and how he talks and how he addresses people and when he talks about comics that seduced me into wanting to pick up The Shade. He just came off as such a nice guy. In addition to the fact he's a great writer. I know that's a horrible way to judge what comics I should pick up or what writers to follow, but it actually can be a considerating factor into me wanting to read a particular writer. See, there are a few writers out there that just come off as assholes, and there's some writers out there that come off as elitists. There's some writers I won't even read, despite the fact that they could be fantastic writers. They just come off as jerks, plain flat and simple. However, James Robinson, not only being a good writer, but also comes off as a nice guy, inclines me to want to pick up his material more. So far he has 2 good things going for him. He's a good writer, and he's a nice guy. So I said to myself, well, geez, I'm going to be picking up his stuff on Earth 2 with the Justice Society, and seeing that The Shade is going to be a mini-series, might as well pick it up and see how it is. So I went out and I picked up the first 4 issues of The Shade. Now, when it comes down to The Shade, I don't know as much of the characters I would know other things. I'm pretty well versed in the DC universe, but my knowledge on The Shade or Starman or the universe that James Robinson has created with these characters is actually really minimal. I know the basic stuff, the powers, maybe their abilities, but that's about it. So going into The Shade, my knowledge is relatively that of a newbie. I know! I did some research here and there on some characters, looked on a few websites to kind of get a little gist so that I wasn't too lost, but for the most part, I'm going into this relatively blind, which is on one hand a little aggravating, but on the other hand kind of exciting. It's like I'm going to get a fresh taste of a new character that I've never tried before. So, in saying that, let's talk about the Shade issues number 1 through 4. Now, I won't go too much into detail about the plot because I don't want to give any of the twists and turns away. The Shade is going to be a 12-issue maxi series, mini or maxi. I forget what constitutes a maxi series. Is it over 6 issues? Don't know. But it is going to be written by James Robinson with a rotating cast of artists. Cullen Hamner, and I hope I pronounced that right, did the first 3 issues, and Darwyn Cooke did the 4th issue, which was a surprise to me. Because I'm a big fan of Darwyn Cooke. I really do like his stuff, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the basic concept of this series thus far is that in the first issue, a contract is put on Shade for his death, and who is hired to take out the Shade, none other than Deathstroke the Terminator. Anyways, the Shade is a little upset that someone wants to kill him, and he wants to go and find exactly who put this contract on him. This makes him come into contact with a lot of unique individuals throughout the DC universe. Some people new, some people old, some people making their first appearance in the new DCU since Flashpoint. For example, Vigilante, the one that was the cowboy, not the Teen Titan one, but the one that was the cowboy, he shows up in this. Pretty interesting. And that's the basic concept. It is an adventure of him going out and finding out who wants to kill him, which is kind of an important thing to find out. But that's the basic concept, and like I said, I don't want to give too much away of the series. So I might as well just jump into the good, the bad, and whether or not you should get it. Good. This has a good concept behind it. I like the adventure story sense. I like adventures, and I like with Shade, who is a very Victorian-like character, for lack of a better term, at least in his mannerisms and how he presents himself and how he talks. It gives a kind of the best way to equate it, and I don't know if this works well for you guys, but when I read this, it reminds me a little bit of the new Sherlock Holmes movies. I know it's silly, but it kind of does, at least with that adventure sense and going from place to place and all that junk. And I like adventure. I like how he's not in one place at one point. Maybe he's England, but then maybe he's in Opal City, and then maybe he's in Australia. Then we flash back to the 40s where he's dealing with World War II. Yes, issue 4 is a flashback issue, and it's good that they brought Darwyn Cooke in for that because he's good with stuff from the 40s. But a good adventure sense. And the Shade as a character is a likable character. I know originally he was a villain for, I believe, The Flash, and then I think both Flashes, I could be wrong. And also he was a villain for Starman, but he's kind of an anti-hero here, which is kind of cool. He is a guy that has his own sense of morals and values. He feels, he has emotions, he loves, and he cares. But at the same time, he's not opposed to doing dark things, torturing people, killing people when it suits him. He may not necessarily want to do it sometimes, but he's not opposed to doing it. In addition to that, Shade has a love interest in this, which is Hope O'Neill, I think? I forget. Hope something. And how he handled the relationship for like just the first issue or the second issue also was pretty good. It's a nice relationship. It's a different kind of relationship than we usually get, but it is one based on understanding, love, and it's a good way to write that character out without having to be constantly in these issues. Where I do like the character, I want this to be on the Shade. The art is also really good in this. Cullen Hamner, if I butcher your name, I'm sorry. He does a great job with the Shade and the art and how the Shade uses his power. It looks really good. And Darwyn Cooke, as always, is great with comics, especially period comics set in the 50s and 40s and 30s, 20s. I would love a comic where Darwyn Cooke just did World War II stuff in the 50s. If you don't know who Darwyn Cooke is, he's well known for his stuff on Catwoman and also his material on stuff like Justice League New Frontier. Not Justice League, DC New Frontier. Justice League New Frontier is the movies based off of it. So the art is great in this. Really good. And that's the good. Let's get on to the bad. Although I really do like the story, and although I love the dialogue in this, and the dialogue is really good, sometimes it can be a bit wordy. A little bit wordy. Not too often. I think there may have been once or twice where I was sitting there and it It was a little bit too wordy for me. But besides that, it was, I mean, the dialogue is great. It's just too much of the dialogue can be a little overbearing for me. I want to be able to seamlessly transition over from panel to panel. But again, it's few and far in between. Um, in addition to that, while this is actually pretty welcoming to new readers, it still would be nice to have a little bit more information on certain characters that we know nothing about. For example, the love interest Hope something. I had to go online just to look up and get a little bit of information on who she was. I didn't need much, just a little blurb here and there would have helped out. And some people may not know too much about the Starman universe, so they might be a little confused. But other than that, it is actually pretty welcoming to new readers. There's just a few things here and there that it would have been nice to have a little information on. On a whole, this is a really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. James Robinson does not disappoint in the shade thus far. I like how it's an adventure story. Is it the best of the new DC 52? Not quite, but it's definitely within the top 10, I would want to say. It is a pretty good series. It is definitely worth picking up. For a 12-issue miniseries, it's not like you have to commit too much to it. Yeah, also, it's for 12 issues, and after that, it'll be done, and it is enjoyable. So I recommend picking it up. The Shade, issues number 1 through 4 are out right now. You can pick them up at your comic store or at wherever you go to pick up your comics, or you can pick up digitally. And check out other stuff James Robinson has done. I recommend his Justice League run after Cry for Justice. We don't talk about Cry for Justice. But after Cry for Justice, the stuff with Dick Grayson and Don Troy. And also I read Batman Face to Face, which he did, and I actually really enjoyed that also. And also pick up his Starman stuff. Although I did not read it, it has been critically acclaimed and widely received. So check that out also. But 4 issues Shade, pick them up. This is Andrew saying, peace out for now.